There are a lot of reasons to love Shimano, most notably its outstanding shifting and braking. And if that's all Shimano did, it would still be a great company.
Oh yeah, I would still be on board, but they do so much more. Take sunglasses, for example. That's right, Shimano does shade. And like its shifting and braking, Shimano does optics well. First, Shimano has developed a line of lenses that are tailored to different riding conditions: gravel, road, and mountain. Shimano has a lens to match any discipline.
Shimano calls its technology Ridescape. Now, I got a chance to check them out at Sea Otter last year, and I'll have to say those lenses really enhance the ability to pick out the details of the tarmac, gravel, road, or trail. Because instead of offering different tints, yellow, rose, gray, or clear, Shimano's 6 Ridescape lenses are tuned to emphasize the different colors encountered depending on where you ride.
Shimano has recently added to its Ridescape lineup by introducing 3 new models. In addition to the S-Fire and Aerolite frames, there's now Technium, Technium L, and Twin Spark. Now, instead of detailing all 5 frames here, we'd encourage you to go to the Shimano website to see which frames have interchangeable lenses and which don't. And of course, by checking them out online, you can get an idea whether the look is right for you.
Yeah, because your shades should make you look cool too. For the entire Ridescape lineup, go to bike.shimano.com and thank Shimano for being the title sponsor of this show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Shimano. It is Season 7, Episode 4 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Hottie, Hottie to most.
And I'm Eldon Nelson, fatty on this show and just about everywhere else too. We've got a packed show this episode. We started the season by talking about testing. Now we're going to explain training zones. Jonathan Lee is back to help us with that. And we have an interview with USWE on its updated race hydration pack. But we want to start with getting you to the finish.
And here comes Eldon Nelson with 14 minutes to spare on that clock. The bragging rights and the heavy hardware, that's all you. Welcome back to your Leadville family and your finish line.
All right, last year we had LFAQs, Leadville Frequently Asked Questions. This season, it's Fatty's Finishing Tips, or FFTs.
It sounds too much like FTP, man. It gives me a little bit of stress just hearing that. This tip is all about the numbers, Hottie. I've noticed many people putting decals or pieces of their tape on their top tubes, and usually those have times and distances for the aid stations on the course. Their target times for getting to Pipeline and Columbine and so forth. And honestly, I've struggled with having a tip about tearing off that piece of tape because I feel like those targets either confirm you're doing okay, which is a minor help at best, or tell you that you're behind schedule, which can trigger a surge, fade, despair cycle, especially late in the race.
So that's your tip? Don't put your aid station time targets on your top tube. That's a short tip.
Yes, it is a short tip, so you know me better than that. The fact is, for me, those kinds of pieces of tape don't help at all. But I am not the only kind of racer. Some racers, like my wife, the Hammer, love having stats that they can check themselves against, and it is comforting to know how they are doing as the day goes by. So I've kind of come around on this. Put whatever data you need on your top tube, but even if you are normally not the kind of person to write numbers down to check yourself against during the race, I have a few mile markers everyone should know and write down on their top tube or on your knee or whatever. All of these are mile markers, and I guarantee you will want to know them during the race. I seriously do recommend writing them down for reference during the race because I promise your memory plays funny tricks on you at 11,000 feet and above. So while you might think that these 4 numbers, and it's just 4 I'm about to give you, are easy to remember, you might want to put them on your top tube anyway. The first number you should write and remember, 52. That is your mileage at the turnaround. It is not 50 miles, it is 52. The second number you should write down is 84. That is the mileage when you are basically at the top of the power line inbound. Honestly, Hottie, this is the single most important number of the race. Mile 80 to 84, just 4 miles, is what puts the hardest into our tagline, highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. The truth is, you are not quite done climbing power line when you hit mile 84, but at least the agonizing part of it is behind you. The third critical number is 93. This is your mileage when you turn off the brutal paved Turquoise Lake Road at the Carter Neutral Aid Station. My mind always plays these outrageous tricks on me as I am doing this climb, and it is only by knowing that number, 93, that I am able to quiet my mind and stop thinking that I am done with this climb about 5 turns before I am actually there. And then finally, 105. That is the actual mileage of this race. It is not 100. The Leadville 100 is 105 miles long, and that is not a rounding up here. In fact, when you hit 100, you still have one surprisingly nasty climb ahead of you. But that is a tip for another episode.
Okay, quick recap version here for those who have been finding a piece of duct tape and a Sharpie. 4 numbers you want to know. 52, that's a turnaround at the top of Columbine. 84 is when the power line nightmare ends. 93 means you're done with that climb up the Turquoise Lake Road, not dirt, road to the Carter Aid Station. And finally, 105, the actual distance of the Leadville Trail 100.
Yep, trust me, those 4 numbers are going to matter a lot to you on the second Saturday in August this year.
All right, Fatty, the Leadville podcast jersey and t-shirt pre-order is in full swing. How's it going?
I have no idea. That's actually what I love about DNA. From the design to the patterns to the online store setup and maintenance to customer support and delivery, you and I have had to do more or less nothing.
Yeah, that's true. Really, the only work we've done is talking, that is, with the guys at DNA about what we want, and they have done the rest.
Yeah, imagine letting professionals do what they're good at, so you and I can focus on what we're good at.
And that is the DNA business. Great custom kits from concept to delivery, which you can find at dnacycling.com.
Yep, and as Hottie noted, we're just about a week into our own custom gear presale, and if you've enjoyed this show over the years, please show us and our sponsor, DNA, a little love by heading to the leadville.fm/jersey website, where we have a pretty remarkable pair of jerseys and an incredible t-shirt on sale.
It's worth noting that the 2 jerseys don't just look different. The pattern and fabric is also different. If you're looking for the fastest, most aero jersey you can find, check out the pink and purple edition of that jersey. It's in the race cut.
If you're built more like me and less like Hottie, check out the black jersey. It's still got some great color in it, but it's a century cut, which means a 5'7" guy weighing in the high 160s can wear comfortably, actually, a medium.
And finally, check the Leadville.fm t-shirt. It really does speak for itself.
Yes, it does, although not quite literally. You'll find all of these at leadville.fm/jersey.
All right, I think I've mentioned this before, Fatty, but I'm going to mention it again. You know, I did some cross racing this year. It was great to get back between the tape and suffer for 45 minutes. Part of the enjoyment came before the cross calendar even got going, and that was building a bike.
Yeah, last I saw, your cross bike was bent in several places. The pictures were not pretty. The down tube was crunched, and the top tube was a mess. It looked like it was time for a new bike.
Well, actually not. Since it is steel, I sent it back to Fat Chance and had it repaired. Got the paint done locally and did the build myself. And the build featured NV components. It has NV carbon drop bars, an NV flat mount brake fork, and NV G23 wheels.
Oh, I love those wheels. Even you steel guys like your carbon components. I've been on the G23s as well. They're really light. They have a great ride, whether you're rambling down a gravel road on a piece of single track or, as in Hottie's case, bunny hopping cross barriers.
Not quite bunny hopping, but I did get over them. And because NV components are so light, my steel cross bike was light enough that I could carry it over the barriers. It really is a great combo, though. Like you said, steel frame, NV carbon components, and snot running down your chin. You got to love Cross, and you got to love NV. Check them out at enve.com.
All right, we kicked off the season with TranierRoad's Jonathan Lee talking all the ways we can test with the result being our FTP. Oh, by the way, Hottie, I just got my new AI generated FTP from TranierRoad. It's up 3. So good news. Good news in the fatty household. So now what?
Now we use that number to establish training zones, which is what Jonathan is here to help us with now. All right, let's say welcome back to Jonathan Lee of TranierRoad. Of course, he is a USAC coach and a USA Triathlon coach. We have had Jonathan on already this season. We talked about testing, 1, 2, 3, as we are getting ready for our season. And we want to get into zones because out of testing, we should get training zones, I think. Right, Jonathan? We should get training zones out of all this work we've done to set ourselves up for Leadville.
Exactly right. It's not defining our self-worth. It's just giving us good training, right? We've discussed that. And that's a key thing to keep in mind. Really, if you're trying to get a benchmark, and then from that benchmark, you can set your zones thereafter.
There's a lot of zones. There's a lot of, I hear, different methods for spelling out zones, for defining them. If we're working with power meters, how many zones are there, and what do they mean?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a abstract thing that we're defining, right? So that you'll see 3 zone models, you'll see 7 zone models, you'll see 6, you'll see 9. There's a ton of different options. What we typically, in most of those though, again, they're based on where they are. They're based on your threshold. With power, they're based on what percentage of your functional threshold power that zone resides in. So there's active recovery. That's anything below 55% of your FTP. That should feel really easy. Endurance zone, or zone 2, as it's commonly referenced, especially these days, is 55 to 75% of your FTP. Tempo is 76 to 87% of your FTP. And then we use a zone called sweet spot training, commonly like Frank Overton does from Fast Cat, great guy. 88 to 94% is how we define that sweet spot zone. And then there's the threshold zone from 95 to 105% of your FTP, quite uncomfortable. VO2 max is 106 to 120%, and then anything above 120% is considered anaerobic capacity. Sometimes you'll hear people define that as like sprint, or if you go up to like 150 and above, it'll be sprint. But boy, it's a mess. Like if you look at like zones and you ask one person to the other, everybody has their differing opinion on what zones should be. But the main thing is whatever training system you're using, if you're using TranierRoad, it's super easy. It just AI figures out your FTP and it constantly adjusts for you, and you never have to think about your zones. It's just handled, right? And you just do your workouts. But you just want to use whatever system your coach or whoever else is using with you.
So does sweet spot sit in that zone 4 category along with FTP, or has it got its own number?
Yeah, so, it doesn't have its own number. At least in our perspective, it certainly doesn't have its own number. Your FTP is your FTP. It does start to tread into threshold. And the whole concept behind the sweet spot training, which we have some sweet spot training in our plans, we've been labeled as being like entirely sweet spot training. I'm not sure why, but we have, within some of our plans, we have that in there. We think it's a really effective way to be able to accomplish what you were talking about in our last discussion there, Hottie, about going out and doing a lot of aerobic conditioning training. So you were going out and doing a lot of low and slow sort of stuff. So long rides at low intensity, and your goal is to not be dipping into glycolytic reserves. Your goal is to be sitting where you're just using oxygen primarily as that fuel source. And what you're doing is you are making your cells more efficient. Well, the thing is, we're not a system of switches. We're not like you exit one zone and it turns off and suddenly it's all sugar or it's all fat. It's this very blended and orchestral even continuum that you have, where your body has a lot of different pieces that are all working together in harmony to be able to produce whatever you need to produce. And as you train, yes, you do shift the distribution of the different things that you're using, but it's never a system of switches. It's always faders. So sweet spot is a spot where you're still doing a huge amount of aerobic work. And as you get closer and up to your aerobic, that threshold, your FTP, right? Your lactate threshold, there's a lot of different words for it. That's where you're doing the most amount of work aerobically that you can before you start doing more anaerobic work, right? So sweet spot does this really cool thing of not getting you to the point where you're right at your threshold, producing a bunch of lactate, producing a lot of soreness and damage to your muscles that you'll then have to repair from for the next workout. It drops just below that. So it's not doing a lot of damage to your body. And instead, what you're doing is accumulating a lot of coins in that aerobic bank when you're riding at that sort of intensity. So you'll see, especially if you have less time to train, you want to make the most of it. So you'll be spending more time at relatively higher intensities working up toward your threshold than you would if you had 20 hours to train. In that case, if you're always riding around at sweet spot, you would just burn out. It's too much, right? Too much in time for that intensity. So it's all that kind of related to it. But zones are super important, and your FTP won't perfectly define your zones. Eldon, you love to stand and hammer as a single speed racer, and that's your style, right? And somebody's listening to this that thinks that's the worst thing in the world, and they can't dream of doing that. And instead, they want to be able to stay in that saddle and be smooth, even power, and that's how they prefer to ride. All of us have different abilities in these different zones. And I think that that's a really important thing to keep in mind. You may not fall so neatly into these buckets that I just laid out with percentage points. And that's why we had this vision of like making us all video game characters. You know how when you pick out like a car in a video game, it's got like a score for speed, a score for acceleration, another score for handling, and something else. And if you add modifications or change the car around, it changes those abilities. And we view every athlete from that lens of they have unique abilities in each zone. And then what we do is we actually score you, and you have these progression levels so that after every workout, you can see your video game character levels go up. When you did a threshold workout, they go up, or a VO2 or an endurance, and you can see those change. And then based on that, you get appropriately difficult workouts. So zones are super important to have. You get them from testing. But the key thing to remember is that your relative abilities from one zone to the next will change and shift depending on what you're doing and who you are as an athlete. So it's really important to have something that's taking into consideration all of those nuances and how to change the training you're doing.
I love the way that you are emphasizing the uniqueness and the difference between each of us. That, yeah, the way I ride, the way Lisa rides, very different, even though we may finish Leadville in seconds, minutes of each other. In the end, though, we're all looking to be able to somehow check the watermark, the water level of how we are doing. It seems like FTP is at least one of those, if not one of the most important. Is that it? Is our improvement increase of FTP, is that either the best metric or one of the best metrics of how our progression toward a successful Leadville is going?
Yeah, I think so, especially for Leadville, because it's not about, you can't cheat your way through Leadville with just, and I say cheat, I don't mean to imply any negative or moral connotation to that, but what Hottie, we were talking about cyclocross, and you got to be able to punch your way through things, right? And it's a lot of hits and repeated efforts. If you approach Leadville as that, then you're going to have a good ride up St. Kevin's and then a nice DNF after that, right? You can't cheat it. So really, your ability to produce to produce work on the bike, primarily with oxygen, is paramount at Leadville, especially because it's in such rare supply up at that elevation. So a high FTP, because it should be stable power. You should not be going over your threshold at Leadville. You'll have to when you're going up power line because it's a sadistic climb, but you should not be intentionally ever going over your threshold. You should be sitting far below it. So if your threshold's higher, that means that you can ride faster, right? You can do more power and be able to do that. So yes, FTP is very crucial, and that's why there's so many different ways to test and figure out what it is. That's why there's so much attention on it. It's king.
A couple of questions about those areas over threshold, though, Jonathan, in training. First of all, could you clear up some of the labels here? I've heard anaerobic threshold, VO2 max, anaerobic capacity. Okay, could you just clean up some of this stuff for us? And also tell us, in training, are these useful zones for us, for those folks who are preparing for an event where we should see ourselves riding just below threshold?
Yeah, I'll work backwards on that. I don't think those zones are very crucial or important for you to be able to have a good day at Leadville. If you can sprint really well, it doesn't really matter, right? Because even at the end of Leadville, I don't care how good of a sprinter you are, you're going to sprint like a wet noodle on the bike anyway after riding at that elevation for that long. So no, they don't matter. They're not as relevant. But the thing is, you raise your threshold by pushing up from the ground and also pulling up from above. If you think of it like a house and your threshold is the roof, You can pull from the top of the roof with that anaerobic work and it will raise it. And then you can also support it and push it from the bottom with that aerobic work. You should primarily be pushing from the bottom, not pulling from the top. And so I think that you should primarily focus on the easier stuff and not worry if your high power isn't that great. In terms of clearing up all the terminology, I can't really do that. There's so many different terms that people will have. And whatever I say, some person's going to say, that's incorrect. I have this opinion on what it should be called. But the most simple thing that I can say is that below your threshold, you're primarily aerobic. Above your threshold, you're increasingly more anaerobic. And that's really the changeover point that's most important. That's what determines if you're going to blow up at some point or if you can sustain that effort for effectively ever. And that's where we really get to the point where anything beyond that starts to dribble into semantics and complication. So we prefer to keep training simple. We just say threshold, and then after that, VO2 max, and then after that, anaerobic. VO2 max because that's close to your maximal peak aerobic uptake that you do with a VO2 max test, right? And then anaerobic is that short-term stuff where you're just using all the juice you got left in your legs.
So in general, will a TranierRoad program set up for a Leadville athlete have that athlete periodically or spend at least some of his training time in those areas above FTP?
Yes, primarily you'll be supporting and pushing from the bottom with lower intensity work, but absolutely, there will be days where you do VO2 and that sort of thing, and it's important to do that. Yeah,
important but hard to do. It's oh man, the number of times I have presented with my 3 workout options, gone another time. So I want to reduce this to the most practical thing we can here. So we get our FTP. We know how much we weigh, right? You divide your weight into your FTP and you have your watts per kilogram. What are the numbers that matter for the Leadville racer? I would love to know. If you can, tell us if I am looking for a sub 12 finish, which I think is most of our listeners what they care most about. Anything under 12 is gravy. And then there's a subset of us who are looking at a sub 9. And anyone else, the people who are looking for a sub 8, they know what their number is already. So help us know if we know how much we weigh and what our FTP is, what whether we are going to be able to hit those magic numbers.
Yeah, so I big caveats here. Aerodynamics and weather will change this. Your rolling resistance, if you're out there running minions and tank treads out there versus running that's like slicks, it all depends. But assuming that you have a very optimized aerodynamic profile and your tires are efficient and all that stuff, if you're doing that, by my calculations, which we were able to calculate Keegan's time very closely last year, is insane time that he was able to do. We were able to calculate that one really closely. I think that if you want to do sub 9, you have to do something that's going to be around 2.5 watts per kilogram. That's roughly, I think, what you need to do to go sub 9, which some of you are listening to this at sea level and you think, oh, that's easy. Remember, you're talking about like a 20% drop in power output when you go up to 10,000 feet. So drop whatever you do at sea level by 20%, then figure out what that power to weight rate would be. That's important to do.
We've said a number of times that if the Leadville 100 happened, starting in Los Angeles, it wouldn't be a famous race, right?
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. No.
It is the fact that you are that high that matters.
Exactly.
Yeah, and before you go forward, Jonathan, real quick on that math. So I take my FTP and lower it by
correct
20% and keep my weight the same, correct? That's the
yes,
math.
If only we could also reduce our weight by 20% when we went up there. That would be great too. But yep, you just reduce your FTP. And then that makes all your zones a whole lot easier. Man, it makes it, it's easy. If you want to go sub 12, I think anything 1.5-ish, 1.6, I think watts per kilogram is what you probably need to do to go sub 12. And here's how you use power. This is going to be super short, but here's how you use power to pace in a day like that. You reduce your FTP by roughly somewhere around 20%. If you're Keegan, you're weird and you only reduce it by 5%, and I don't understand. He's a freak of nature. But for most of us, 20%, we drop it. And then from there, you can understand that for a day like Leadville, you're just going to be fighting to hold 70% of your FTP by the end of that day. You're altitude adjusted FTP. So drop your FTP by 20%, then think, okay, my average power should be somewhere around 70% of that altitude adjusted FTP. And if I pace by that, boom, I'm good. What that will feel like is painfully and dreadfully easy in the first part. And then at the end, it'll feel like everything you can possibly do to hold on to it. But that's what a good, well-paced day at Leadville looks like.
And on my head unit, what should I have there that tells me whether or not I'm on target? Because average power is going to fluctuate a lot, I would think. And that cannot be relied. So intensity factor, what can I look at to know almost from the gun that I'm on a good pacing strategy with power?
Yes, I mean, your average power will fluctuate and change around. I would look at your normalized power, because it's non-zero and it's a weighted average. So then I would look at normalized power. I would look at distance. So then you can keep track of your feed zones and everything else. I'd look at elapsed time, and that's probably it. I might look at speed as well, something like that, if I want to, just because it's fun. And then that way it's just another thing, because you'll know after you do this, you'll know that my average power at the end of this needs to be this. So look at your normalized power in relation to that, or look at your average power for that. And then you can look at intensity factor, like Hottie said. But in the end, sometimes it's also easier to say, well, to do that, that would give me a finishing time of this, and I would need to keep this average speed. And sometimes it's nice just to have a secondary math metric, because we don't do good math when we're on the bike, and we do much worse math when we're at 10,000 feet.
Some really practical stuff here, Jonathan. And it is worth noting that you are not just prescribing this. You have actually lived this approach in doing the race and have seen that it works. I remember passing you 45 miles in, and then you passing me a little bit later because you were riding smarter than I was. So always a pleasure talking with you. Always a pleasure riding with you. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a great race at Leadville.
Once again, thanks to Jonathan Lee. TranierRoad.com is the place to go if you want to get hooked up with a Leadville-specific training plan. And in the Trainer Road podcast, you'll find great information where you can dive deeper on all things about training zones and adaptive training.
So let's talk hydration packs here. We're going to hear about USWE's updated Outlander, the most popular bladder system at Leadville. And since we're talking hydration, let's dig into some offerings from the feed.
Yeah, many of us will put plain water in our hydration packs, but to keep your electrolyte levels stable, you can put a mix in your bladder as well. And what goes in largely depends on what you sweat out and what conditions you're riding in.
Yeah, the feed breaks it down into 3 categories. For light, less salty sweaters, choose Untapped, Maple-Aid Mix, or SIS Go Electrolyte. Medium amounts of sweat calls for Never Seconds C30 or SIS Hydro Tablets. And for heavy, salty sweaters, Element or Scratch High Sodium Hydration.
Yeah, again, most riders, like myself, like plain water in their bladder, but we all need to make sure we have fluids with electrolytes on our bike. So, bladder, bottle, bada bag, hat, whatever. Just make sure you are paying attention to this half of your hydration, and the feed is the place to go to get what you need.
Okay, Fatty, I know how much you love the USWE hydration pack. So when I ran into the company at the Cabda show, that's a somewhat medium-sized bike show that roams around the country, and they told me they had updated their popular Outlander pack, I had to get them on mic. Here's my interview.
My name is Kelly Jones.
Okay, Kelly, and your official title is?
Is the Sales and Marketing Manager for USWE.
Sales and Marketing Manager for USWE. You're also a hell of a racer, I understand, Kelly. Give us a quick rundown of your experience off-road.
Well, off-road, I'm a mountain bike racer and gravel racer and an e-bike racer, actually. So I don't do any road racing. I'm the 2023 National E-Bike Champion, and I'm also the 2023 Esports Champion. So those are my most recent accolades. But I like stage racing. Swiss Epic I did last year, did Cape Epic the year before. So I enjoy any type of off-road and definitely gravel racing. Has been, definitely up on my to-do list a little bit more this year coming up. But now I try to manage working a lot with racing, so I do a little less racing, and it's more for fun nowadays, to be honest.
Heard of the Leadville Trail 100, I gather?
Of course, yes. We'll probably be there. I'll probably be there. We are actually going to be at quite a few of the Lifetime series. Last year we were at Unbound and Big Sugar. I was there in our booth. This year we'll be definitely, I'm actually going to be at the Miami Marathon in a couple weeks. We'll be there with a booth, and then we'll be at Unbound. We'll definitely be at Leadville. We'll be at Big Sugar again and Little Sugar, potentially Crusher, and some other ones. So we'll be at quite a few of those events scattered throughout the season.
Well, it's pretty easy to notice at the Leadville Trail 100 specifically that the USWE pack is the most popular pack running. And so we don't normally on this show get too product focused, like pay too much attention to one product or the other, but this one's hard to ignore. And I think it's worth noting some of the changes you folks have brought to this popular race pack, that is. So again, remind me of which model we're looking at here, and then why don't we go through some of the changes you folks have done to the USWE pack?
Okay, sure. So the pack that is, we're really known for, and the one that you are going to see the most, especially on all the professional racers, is our Outlander Pro. So that is our 2-liter hydration pack, and it's basically a very light, very breathable race pack. It carries 2 liters of water, a small inside pocket, but it's really made for racing. So we are very excited to have, a sample of the new version that will be coming out hopefully sometime this spring. And actually, I'm excited because it's the first time I've actually seen it. So it's going to have a name change. It's going to be called the Racer 2.0. So we're going to shift the name, and we've made some changes that we're really excited about. So I can go over those. And obviously, I have the pack. This is, no video here, but one of the main differences when you look initially at the pack, and anybody that has this pack will understand what I'm saying. The mesh strapping is a black mesh with a gray strip edging on it. So now we've made the pack all black. Hopefully that will be a little less dirty looking, I think, on the edges. We've also updated the mesh. So it is actually an even lighter, more breathable mesh, which it was already light and breathable, but I'd say we've improved on that. We've also changed the backing. So we've actually removed the back on the pack, and there's basically a very light black mesh backing on that. It's got a cool little red strip in the middle just for, to look cool. But we've reduced as much material as we can to shave a little bit of weight off the pack. I couldn't give you what the weight shaving amount is. I don't know. But it is a tiny bit lighter. And then another huge change that we have on the interior, which I think everybody will be really excited about, is it now comes with a insulated sleeve that the bladder sits in. Now, you don't have to use the insulated sleeve. So if you want to remove that to shave whatever that weighs, you could. But there's a very lightweight insulated sleeve that the bladder sits into. So of course, what that's going to do is any of those hot days, and I will say that a lot of people choose the white version of the Outlander Pro because of the heat. It's on your back. You don't want dark colors. You want to reflect that sun. So this insulated sleeve for the bladder is going to help keep that pack cool. And I think it's going to be a really nice change. And I think everyone's going to be pretty excited when they see it.
So the Outlander Pro becomes the Racer 2.0. That's the big name change people want to look for if they're looking to, replace their Outlander Pro or get into a USWE pack. Tell us some things that are not changing besides the name.
Okay.
With this Racer's pack.
So we're going to keep the same 2 colorways. So we're going to have white and we're going to have black, just like we've done before. Our other packs, we have quite a few different colors. We're going to stick with those 2 basics, black and white. The construction of the pack, as far as the 4-way stretch harness system, is exactly the same. We did update our buckle system a little while ago. So anybody that's bought a pack really in the last year or even more will already have that new buckle system. So that's going to be always on all the packs moving forward. which is really nice. But, the construction as far as the shape of the pack, the size of the pack in the back, and that four-way stretch, which is obviously what we're known for, to make sure that you can keep that pack on super tight and have no dancing monkey on your back. That's all staying the same. We're still continuing to use HydroPack bladders and their tubing. So that will all stay the same, which we've, had a lot of good luck with, and they're very, great products from HydroPack. So that's, the things that will stay the same. Just some nice updates, I think.
What should people know about their pack that maybe they don't know? Like, for instance, hose length. How can we deal with hose length if we need to?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't know this, but our tubing, and everybody knows our tubing. It's red. We're the only company that has red tubing for their hydration packs. So our tubing is a standard length, which if you're tall, that's fine. You don't even notice. For me, I'm 5'6". That tubing's too long for me. So if I have the tubing hanging down, it's way too long. It catches on my seat. It's no good. A lot of people think that it's a long tubing because they're supposed to make a U shape and kind of clip it up and over. But actually our tubing is made to be trimmed to size. So it's made to order, like you just do it yourself. You pull off the bite valve off the end of the tubing. You measure it. Obviously you put it on, make sure your bladder's in correctly, pull it over your shoulder, and then measure the length that you want, snip off the end, and then pop the bite blaster valve back on. And then you have your own custom length tubing.
I know this is somewhat of a biased question for you to answer, but it's fine. But what do you think are the real reasons why the folks that are doing long, hard, fast events gravitate towards this pack? What makes it kind of the thing to have if you're going with more than just bottles?
I think that first of all, we're the only company that's really been innovative in this particular area and came out with, something that's different, that sits on the body differently. It is definitely distributes weight better, is more comfortable. It's more aero, which has actually been tested. There was a pretty famous person, Dylan Johnson, that did some testing last year, and he was very nice to share that information, and it actually made him more aerodynamic wearing the pack. But I think, we are the lightest pack, the most comfortable pack, and I would say that that's the main choice. It just works the best. And we've had a lot of organic marketing because of that. And I think that racers want water. They don't want a whole bunch of other stuff, a lot of things hanging, flapping. We don't have any of that. It's a simple system. It's got one clip. So if you're swapping packs in the middle of a race in a feed station, you have one clip to take it off and one clip to put it back on. So that's obviously saving time for any professional racer. So I think that that's a few of the reasons.
And as a racer yourself, is this the one you use, or usually has other packs they can go to? Is this your go-to, or do you mix and match?
Depending on the race. So I actually, something that people don't know is that the Outlander Pro, soon to be the Racer 2.0, has a different upper strap system, which is the mesh strapping, because we want it to be as light as possible and as breathable as possible. However, because of that, it's the only pack that isn't, you can't use our GoPro harness system with it, which we do have one. So if I am doing a race, for instance, Swiss Epic, where I wanted to get a lot of GoPro footage, then I usually choose the MTB Hydro 3 because that actually has a removable rear pouch. So if I need some extra tools for those long stage races, I like that. And also I can use my GoPro mount with that particular pack. Now, if I'm doing, a gravel race and, I'm not normally, YouTubing or doing any type of GoPro footage, then yes, I'm going to choose the soon-to-be Racer 2.0, formerly the Outlander Pro, would be my choice in a race.
Well, it's cool to see a great product take some marginal gains or take a small step, a decent step forward to keep innovating itself, and clearly that's what we have with the Racer 2.0. Again, we're looking at a springtime, and price-wise, are we roughly in the same ballpark? So
it's actually going to be $10 more. We're at $109 right now, so it'll go up to $119. So a small difference, but you're getting, quite a lot. And, just having the insulated sleeve in itself is more than, that $10. So I think that people shouldn't have too many problems with that, hopefully.
And availability, are you folks dealer only, or can we find you online? How does that work?
So we're actually at this show right now, trying to build up our dealer network of shops that do carry our product. We have been more direct to consumer on our own website on USWE.com, but we hope to be in a lot more stores by the end of 2024, which is our goal and something that I'm personally working on myself.
Kelly, here's to good racing and good hydration.
Yes,
thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Kelly Jones, Sales and Marketing Manager for USWE. I appreciate it when a company makes a great product better. And look, it should be noted, there are other terrific packs on the market. Camelback makes great stuff and, in fact, has focused on the endurance off-road rider with its Chase vest. Osprey is another brand you will see at Leadville. Fatty, I have noticed that you ride USWE, but Lisa the Hammer does not. Does she not like something about the USWE pack that steers her to another brand?
Yeah, Lisa is one of those Chase vest devotees. The USWEs I've had her try on don't fit her comfortably. That X-shaped harness, the system that they use, works great for me, but it goes right across the chest, which compresses for a lot of women pretty painfully. And she is not the only woman who has had this challenge with the USWE harness system.
Yeah, no, indeed. In fact, I reached out to Kelly after this interview, and she noted about the USWE harness. This is what she told us. The trick is that they cannot choose the Outlander Pro or now the new Race 2.0, which we just discussed in that interview. You cannot adjust the top straps on that particular pack, so you need the packs that have the adjustable top straps so they can make the straps longer and therefore make the pack straps sit underneath the bus line as opposed to straight across the top, which is very uncomfortable for anybody that's, as she said, busty. There are two packs that women who are interested in a USWE pack should look at if they're in this situation. That would be the Outlander 2 or the Mountain Bike Hydro 3.
All right. It really comes down in the end to the fact that you've got to treat your pack like you do your grips, your shoes, your helmet, and your saddle. It's a contact point. You've got to test for fit initially and then test it on some long rides as well, long before race day.
Yes, you do. If you like the show, go to wherever you listen and give us a 5-star rating and write a review to see all the ways you can find this independent show. It is Leadville.fm.
Good luck in your training. Thanks for listening, and we're going to see you at the starting line.